Video talking to you today about how do you pick a contractor. One of the most important things you can do as a real estate investor is pick a good contractor and build a good team of subtrades and quality contractors. I've had my fair share of good, okay, and really bad contractors over the time. I've had contractors steal from me. I've had contractors break their word. I've had contractors threaten liens on properties for mistakes they've made. I've had contractors, that have been great too. I've had, a whole mix. And it comes down to, at the end of the day, there are three variables that really matter when you're trying to pick a good contractor. And that's affordability, reliability, and quality in the work that they do. So you can never ever have 10 out of 10 on all three aspects. It just doesn't exist. If you find a contractor who's amazing, their quality is perfect, they don't make hardly any mistakes, they fix everything, and they're really affordable, and they always show up when they say they're going to show up, and they put in full time, and they aren't job hopping, and they aren't, balancing too much. If they're truly reliable, affordable, and they have quality work, you won't have them for very long. Someone is going to snipe them and take them for their own team. Someone's going to pull them away, or they're going to realize that their value is greater than the value that they're charging, and they will raise their price. Something has to give. You can never have the perfect trifecta. So you have to build your pyramid and decide what factors are most important for you. Because the contractor in real estate investing BRRRR strategy is so important, you need to make sure that you follow a few guidelines when you're picking a good contractor. If you have a bad contractor, if you go out on Kijiji and you pick a really bad guy who's going to overestimate and bleed you dry, you might find that your project goes so over budget that there's no profit left over. And we don't flip real estate, we don't renovate properties, we don't do this out of the goodness of our heart, we don't do this because we love it, although that might be something that some real estate investors love, that might be it, but most of us are here to make money. And so if you're not making money, what's the point? Why are you wasting your time? So that's why picking a good contractor is so important. They can destroy your property, cause issues with tenants down the road because of mistakes they've made. You could lose tenants over it. You could lose potential profit over it. Very important. And when it comes to selling your property down the road, it's going to have an impact. So very important that you pick a good contractor. And so at the outset, I would say go ahead and on a piece of paper, draw out your individual pyramid. What things matter to you. So if you're on a project and timeline isn't as important, let's say you have tenants that are already set up to move in 60 days from now, and you know the job's you have a 30-day job to complete. Reliability might not be a huge factor for you. You might find that if they show up, every other day, and they're job hopping and they're working on another job, which I actually really hate when contractors do this. It pisses me off because they don't prioritize your work and then they blow through timelines. But let's just say that reliability wasn't important. You could then find a contractor that was like 9.5 out of 10 on affordability. Someone's like 20 bucks an hour or really affordable, and they do really good work. I found a lot of guys like this. I still find guys like this all the time, subtrades especially, that'll come in, be good for a week or two, and then they'll disappear on you. You won't be able to get a hold of them for a month, and then they'll text you that they need some money, or they're, how that's just the nature of working with tradespeople. They aren't usually very good with their money, and so they'll message you and say, hey, I'm really looking for work, what do you got? And that's when they're desperate for money. You can usually get a deal on affordability. And if they do good work, let's say that their specialty is laying floor or something, you could have them lay out a whole house worth of floor in a weekend for $500 to $1,000 sometimes. If you're doing job price versus, unless you're doing hourly, it kind of depends. There's a trade-off, and I can talk about the trade-off. At a really high level, hourly, you have to believe that they're going to work very hard. If they're, what they call fucking the dog and kind of taking their time and bleeding the hours or texting on their phone, this and that, then the hourly thing isn't going to be so great. But if they are really good hustlers and that they can get the job done really quickly and effectively, then hourly might be the way to go, especially if you're worried about quality. If they're hourly, they might take their time, make sure they do it properly. If they're quoting by the job, they might rush the job just to get paid. They might cut corners, they might skip things. So something to consider, right? And the other side of it is that when they're working job, they're more motivated, they'll get through the timelines quicker so they can get paid quicker. Whereas hourly, they'll drag out the jobs. Something to think about when you're paying, but you could potentially, going back to the main example, find someone who's really good at what they do and really affordable, but maybe not reliable at all. And you might bring a few of these different guys in there and you have to walk behind them and babysit them. And that might be something you want to do, and especially in the beginning when you have more time on your side. But eventually you're going to get tired of that and you have to build up systems and teams. And so I, for instance, have several flooring guys, several plumbers, several electricians, several framers, general contractors that I can call, roofers, all of these people that I've built into my network that I can call at a moment's notice to come and quote a job or come and take care of a job. And that's really important, is building that team, building that network. I strive personally for affordability as a very important factor. Quality of work also, I aim for at least an 8 out of 10 on quality. It's a rental property, so it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be crown molding, caulked just perfectly, but there can be small little imperfections that the eye won't notice. That's okay. If the grout line isn't quite perfect in a rental property, that's not the end of the world. You gotta kind of make the trade-offs and pick what's important to you. Reliability tends to be very important to me because time is money. Every month I'm not renting a unit. It could cost me up to $1,000, $1,500 for that month. That's just straight loss, right? So that's something that's really important to me is reliability and affordability and quality of work. I aim to try to get all three. But again, you have to give in certain areas, right? You have to be flexible. But I'm gonna talk to you about a few tips. So when I was picking contractors in the beginning of subtrades, some of the things that I looked for were, I would go on Kijiji or, places you can go on Craigslist and places like that, wherein what you'll find is that there's a lot of fly-by-nighters. So they might be good for a little while, but then they'll drop off halfway through your project and leave you high and dry, or they'll take the next advance or drawdown on the contract price and then disappear, or things like that, right? Or they'll break in and steal all your materials and use them for different jobs. I've had that happen. This was a few years ago and I was still very novice. And I've had things come in where, they might take some of your tools, sometimes by mistake, sometimes on purpose, to hawk them for extra money. You get a whole mix of things, right? So that's something that stems back to trust, right? At the end of the day, trust is the most important thing. I feel to trust my tradesperson in my investment property. They are dealing with something that's very, very valuable, several $100,000s in assets, right? And thousands of materials, potentially a lot of tools. Other sub-trades might be coming in and out. So I need to be able to rely on that person to be trustworthy. If I sense that they have a drug addiction, very common in Kijiji type trades, or I sense that they, have had a run-in with the law, or they're desperate. I don't like desperate trades. I try to avoid guys that are, just out for a quick buck. Sometimes that can be, be really bad on the back end. It can really bite you in the ass. So that's something to avoid. Another thing is to look for is that they show up and they put in the time. A lot of guys will come for an hour or two and then hop to another job, or they've got 3 or 4 jobs on the go. I'll ask questions like that, like how many jobs do you have on the go right now? What sort of projects are you working on right now? And I can get a flavor usually for the types of work they do, which also kind of stems back to what they specialize in. A lot of guys say, I can do everything, and that's not true. No one can do everything well. There might be a guy who's really good at tile, and he's your tile guy. There might be a guy who just specializes in framing, he's a fast framer, he might be your framer. Another guy might be really good at kitchens, and he can put in cabinetry like you wouldn't believe, right? And lay those countertops like just mint, right? And a nice backsplash or whatever. Maybe I'm stretching too far, maybe he just specializes in cabinetry. But you've got to find the areas of strength and utilize those people for those areas. I know sometimes even I will be unable to get another trade, and I might ask my, for instance, flooring guy to also handle, trimming out some doors and stuff like that as well. And I know he can do that well, but that might not be his best skill set. And so if I'm paying him hourly or a job, especially hourly, I'll be getting a worse value for my money when he's working on, millwork, things like adjusting doors and things like that, when I know he's faster at flooring. So I pay him the same hourly rate potentially for work he isn't as good at. And that's another thing that's important too, is when you're looking at someone who's specialized at what they do, you might see one flooring guy who's $40 an hour and another that's $20 an hour. And I've hired $40 an hour flooring guys who are literally 3 times as fast and twice as good as the guy who's $20 an hour. And in fact, a lot of times you see this as painters. People think anyone can paint. That's not the case. A really good painter is quick and fast. They can cut in along the center of or along the top of the wall effortlessly, where other guys might be taping or taking their sweet time, right? So you're paying someone $15, $20 an hour sometimes and getting, you could be paying the other guy $40 an hour and be getting more value out of that person, even though their hourly rate is higher. So you got to factor in what is the person good at and how much value can they bring. And that value they bring to the project, you need to quantify that, and ideally you pay them less than the value they bring to the project. That's how you get ahead as a real estate investor. That's the most important piece. If you're paying a trade exactly the value they're bringing to the project, the market value of that value they're bringing, you won't make any money. You won't be adding any value to the project. This is why people come in who have no experience, hire general contractors who manage sub-trades, right? So you're gonna have a general contractor who you hire, and then he gets a profit, he marks it up, all the sub-trades work. At the end of the day, there might not be any margin left over. So if you're not effective at picking sub-trades and contractors, what you find is that you blow all the margin in your project and you'll make no money. It's great for guys like myself and real estate investors who can pick up those under market value renovations. They can find those cost cutting measures on the material side. I often can get, for instance, drywall at $6, $7 a sheet when a general contractor might walk into Home Depot and just pay $13 a sheet. He isn't curious, he isn't worried about getting the best deal, the best price. He's just buying it because it's easy. And so that's a way that you can have a competitive edge. And as a real estate investor who's looking to renovate properties and add value, you need to have a competitive edge. And material cost, as well as picking a good contractor, very, very important to maximizing your competitive edge. Some other quick tips before I end this video off. Do they keep on a timeline? So you can ask them about previous timelines they've worked on, and they might lie to you, but you could also call references, and you could ask them, did they finish the job on time? Did the job go 3 weeks over timeline? Why did they go over timeline? Was it because of something you added to the scope of the work, or was it something that where they dropped the ball, or they made a mistake, or they just didn't show up? So that's something to consider. The babysitting factor too is something that used to not bother me at all. I didn't mind being on site, but as I got more and more sites, I've had 5 sites at once running with guys on all 5 sites, and it's impossible to be everywhere at once. And so the babysitting factor became really important. Some guys just need to be handheld. They like to talk when they work, or they just, every time they run into a little issue, they'll call you or text you, or they need you there to answer. What do I do here? I ran into this little issue where I'm not sure that the drywall won't line up in these 2 spots. What do I do? And it's like, you can just put a piece of strapping there, or whatever it is. I might have that answer, but these guys need to be babysat. They don't understand how they can quickly problem solve. Some guys aren't good problem solvers, they're good workers. But that being said, if you're not on site and there isn't a GC on site, you're floating around maybe a couple hours a day, and you don't want your phone to be ringing all day long, then the babysitting factor might be really, really important. Communication is a big thing too. I like trades that communicate well. If you're not communicating daily with your contractor, things are happening on the site that you're not aware of. This is where you run into big trouble. So make sure that the contractor is good at communicating, and you keep those lines of communication open each and every day. Set up ground rules is another really important thing. When you're setting up ground rules, that's essentially saying like, hey, this is when I want you on site. I want you on site from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, let's say, and Sunday I need you there for 5 hours or whatever. If you set up ground rules, right, and whatever those ground rules are, that's how you ensure success, right? If you don't set clear expectations at the outset of the contract, so you could sign contracts. I recommend signing contracts, do a detailed list of the work that needs to be done, make sure both parties are on the same page, sign that contract, get it in writing, and if anything changes, amend the contract accordingly. That's the best way to do it. But in the real world, sometimes you don't have contracts, and you just go about making oral contracts between each parties. And that's why having ground rules is really, really important to ensuring both parties are on the same page. Because both parties on the same page, everything's good. You get that cohesion. It's a win-win. And you want to make sure you can use that contractor in future real estate deals you're working on, or future renovation projects on your properties. So really important to maintain that rapport, right? And just being transparent and honest with each other. That's important. You don't want to screw the contractor. They ideally don't want to screw you because they want to get repeat business with you. So that's something to think about and something to consider. I want to talk about affordability, right? So under affordability, what you'll see is often contractors will understate their estimate to get in the door, or they'll beat another contractor to get in the door, and then they'll overbill you and add extras onto the contract price. That's something that's very, very important. Happens way too often, and it really does become, it can destroy your rental project profit if they do a lot of this overbilling. And I've experienced a lot of this myself with some bad trades that I don't use anymore, but guys that would always get in with a low price, and they do good work, but they'll always, they'll run into something that they didn't see coming. And so then you can get to know the trade, and you'll say, well, did you factor these 3 things into your price? And he'll say, oh yeah, and then when it comes to the job, he'll have nothing he can say when he's there if he runs into some issue or obstacle. Because there's always things that come up. You rip up the floors and you find something you didn't see there before. And so it's about factoring those things in ahead of time and discussing those obstacles. when you're paying trades hourly, which, you know, sometimes you do it by job, sometimes you do hourly, some trades run the meter, and that's something to look out for. You know, they'll clock in longer hours than they're actually there. They'll go get a coffee or go for lunch, and they'll clock in those hours, or they'll answer a phone call for 20 minutes, they'll clock in those hours. There's a certain amount of tolerance that I have for those things, but I've had some contractors that are really bad for doing things like that on site and then billing me for it. That's something to consider when you're paying hourly. I like job rate for that reason, is that you don't get that bullshit. The price is what it is. You get paid based on performance, not based on time clocked in. So if you're just screwing around, not really doing anything, you're not getting paid. And that's something that's important. The other thing that really is, this is a pet peeve of mine, a lot of contractors waste material. You know, they could often repair something, but they'll just throw it out. Or they'll have half a tube of, you know, $12 or $30 acoustic caulking or something, and they wouldn't even put a screw in it to save it for the next day. They'll just throw it out and have to buy more the next day. And that can add to thousands of dollars on a work site in a matter of like weeks. So that's something to consider too. Does your contractor, are they aware of material costs, and are they cognizant of keeping your budget down? Because labor is one part, but materials are the other half of the 1-2 punch. They're going to hit you right in the gut when you're doing a huge property renovation, especially if you're doing a burr. And you know, sometimes it takes longer to do the work. That's one point that I had with you're talking about materials, right? Guys say, well, that'll take me an extra hour to preserve that. And so you gotta weigh that out, right? What is the person's time worth? And will it actually save time? Often trades are very lazy, and so they prefer just to do the easiest route, even if it costs $100 more material, $300 more material. So you have to sometimes weigh that out. And sometimes I'll say, you know, I'd rather pay you an extra hour to do it this way. Even though you don't want to do it that way, it's going to save me $200 in materials or $100 in materials when it's all said and done. So you just learn over time, you build the experience to know how to make those calls and how to make those judgments. References, really big. I now try to only use trades that I've, one, vetted with references, and two, have been referred to me by someone I know, or they're in my network. I like to work with people in my network. It's really important, because at the end of the day, if you're working the fly-by-night on Craigslist or Kijiji or wherever, you're gonna have issues, and when those issues crop up, when those disagreements happen, if they're not part of your network, they could just cut you out like that, take your money and run. There's no repercussions. It's very hard to track people down, and it's honestly not worth the investor's time to go try to settle it in small claims court. So most often, we investors just eat that and lose. So that's something really important. Check references before you hire someone. Please do that. Choosing the right contractor for the right job is really important too. I don't believe one contractor can do everything really well. They can do some things good and some things not as good. And so in certain areas, they might not be adding as much value as, you know, they could. It might be better, in fact, not easier, but better, to bring in a drywall guy, to bring in a taper and mutter, to bring in a framer, to bring in a flooring specialist, to bring in a cabinetry guy, to bring in a windows and doors guy, to bring in a roofing guy, to bring in a plumber, to bring in an electrician, to bring in, there's so many trades, and I can just go on and on and on. I have an HVAC guy who does like gas work. He's a licensed gas fitter. Sometimes getting specialized trades in there can be more affordable, you get better quality of work, and just the project goes along a lot faster, and time is money. You can get a project done for $10,000 over 6 months, or you can get it done for $15,000 in like 3 weeks. It's often better to go $15,000 in 3 weeks, because time value of money, right? What else could you be doing with your time, and all that lost opportunity cost in rent potentially, and if you get a refinance faster, that's huge value too, because you have cash in your hand that much sooner. You can invest and it can grow and build more wealth for you. So not only lost rent, but also opportunity cost there on your money. Never pay up front. And this is something I'm gonna hammer home to you guys, because I've done this too. I've put 25% down. They say they need some materials to start the job tomorrow, whatever. Even on a signed contract, I've done this, and you sometimes get burned. Guys will disappear. You can't get a hold of them. Sometimes 3 weeks later, they'll show up and say, oh, I'm ready to do work now. And it's like, I'll work off that deposit. And I'm like, whoa, I already hired someone else. You didn't get back to me for 3 weeks, left 3 voicemails and 10 texts. So sometimes you have those kind of guys who just are looking for a payout. Stay away from that. If something arises, even if the guy's trustworthy and a good guy, and you have a conflict and something happens and you have to terminate that partnership, if you've got 50% down or 35% down, look out, because that's something to be careful of. I'd rather do a draw system based on completion. So as you complete certain tasks, you get paid out. If you finished, everything's framed, you might get a 20% draw. When you get to this stage, you get a draw. that's the best way to do it. You know, if you need to give them a little bit of money up front, if there are materials, I'll often, if it's a big bill, I'll say, here's my credit card, let's go and buy those materials. You're doing a roof, let's go and buy that roofing material. Especially if I don't trust or know the guy, that's something really, really important. Or girl, there are some great female contractors out there too. I've had my fair share of good and bad female contractors too. Last, interview minimum 3 contractors. If it's a job that's over, say, you know, $2,000 to $5,000, I'll often bring in a second or third guy to quote it out, because what you'll find is at a minimum, the guy you were going to go with anyway will drop his price to match another competitor, so it keeps them honest on their pricing. Often you get a little bit better deal. They'll say, you know what, I could do it for 30 an hour. I like this client. It's an easy job. All right, I'll do it. Sometimes that'll get you a better price too. So bring in multiple contractors. The other cool thing is, if you're planning to go with your regular guy anyway, you bring another contractor for another point of view, another perspective. And I've had some really good revelations with contractors whom shared insight that I didn't think of. It's like, oh, what about doing it this way? Or what about configuring things in this way to save money? And it's like, wow, I didn't think of that with this job. And so that's how you learn too, is bring in a lot of guys and ask them how they would do the job. Have them walk through with you their process. And that'll determine whether, one, you want to hire them, because if their approach is wrong or like way off base, you don't want to hire them anyway. I like to see how my guys think through solving problems and how they actually do the challenge that I'm asking them to complete in their head. And that's really key to determining if they're good contractors. You can sometimes play out a lot of that before you actually get them on site. But another thing is, guys who have been really insightful, even if they weren't the best price on that job, I often called them back for future jobs down the road because they added that value on that quote. So even though they maybe didn't get that job, they got a future job down the road because I liked the way they were thinking and I thought of them for that certain project. This is not by any means an exhaustive list. These are just some tips that I just kind of brainstormed for 5 minutes here real quick for you guys. I could probably do more videos on this, but picking a good contractor is so important. If you're trying to renovate real estate, renovate your own house, picking a good contractor is so important. Hit me up in the comments and let me know if you found this valuable. If there are more things you want to hear about in depth, I'm happy to walk through some of the things that I've experienced, and I can share that value for you guys so you guys can pick a better contractor and get better quality of work out of the people that are working for you. So yeah, if you did like this, please let me know. Please hit the like and subscribe to my video if you to my channel if you enjoyed this. Mike Rosehart here for another YouTube installment, educating you guys on picking a good contractor.